as a commission is around partnerships. And partnerships not only within our community, but also partnerships with externally with our neighbors, with our neighboring municipalities, and with organizations outside. And one project that sort of brings both of those elements, community engagement and partnerships, is the work that we've done around our Arboretum. And I'd like to just share with you, hopefully everybody has seen the new Arboretum. It's a really nice space at the back of Tollgate. And our commission was quite involved with the preparation for the launch of that space a couple of months ago and helping prepare for that. But the way that we've also carried that forward is to partner with the youth in our community in the Arboretum, for example. You know, we're working with the Eagle Scouts to develop nice QR codes that we can put onto various native New Jersey plants and trees within the Arboretum, and the kids have come up with nice descriptions. And so that will be coming up in the next month, next couple of weeks. We're also partnering with the Girl Scouts in Pennington to help us think about the exclosures within the Arboretum and what's the plan for that? How are we going to use that space, and how are we going to think about how we can make it educational around what we put into those exclosures? There are other projects that we're working on with the youth around the bridges in the Arboretum, for example, reworking them. Some of them are not in great shape, and building some new paths in there. So a lot of work like that. And I think the Arboretum is a nice project of itself that sort of highlights some of those things that we're working on. All of this is volunteer driven. And we're really lucky to have a team that brings, I think, both the expertise and the energy to keep things moving. And I want to put a slide up here that shows our Environmental Commission. There are 10 of us. None of us are elected. We're just volunteers. So we're all residents within the community here. And I think we represent a nice cross-section of our community. I mean, some of our members are in their day jobs, working in the environmental area. Some of them, like me, are not. We have people of different age groups. Some people are retired. Some people are with young families. So I think it's a nice group. And I just wanted to spend a minute just recognizing them and to thank them for their involvement, and also to say that if anybody wants to be part of the commission, perhaps as a volunteer or perhaps even to be more formally involved, to please reach out to the borough administration, let them know, because they can reach out to me, and we definitely want to talk to you and would love to have you involved, even if it's not a full-time thing. I mean, if it's not a formal position, we'd just love to connect with you. I wanted to have a slide up here at the front about the power of community, because I think in small towns like ours, and Pennington is not a large municipality by any means, when residents and businesses and organizations and municipal operations come together and take small steps, I think it can often lead to a larger impact, which can be quite meaningful when looked at collectively. And greenscaping, I think, is a perfect example of that. It's not just about beautifying our yards, it's about doing something with meaning and having an environmental purpose. And we're going to learn a lot more about that today. And I think that message of community involvement and community-led projects and local engagement is something that I think if we do individually, it's one thing, but if we do it collectively and we do it as a larger community, it can be quite meaningful and really move the needle on a lot of things. The topics that we are focused on as a commission, and the topic today, greenscaping, is not something that we just randomly came up with. At the end of last year, you helped us choose the areas of focus for us, and we fielded a survey at the end of last year, and we asked you what you thought some of the priorities were for us in terms of the environment, and we got really good engagement from the community, and thank you so much for engaging in that survey. For those that participated, we had over 600 responses, and as you can see on this slide, the two they all sort of ranked very highly, but recycling and greenscaping were the two ones that rose to the very top. And we've already had one event on recycling, and we're doing today on greenscaping. The other topics we want to get to over the coming months and next year. And I want to say that also that these are not one and done conversations. We don't want this to be one conversation on greenscaping and then that's it. This is something that we want to try to introduce and come back to, and hopefully talk about more and get a little bit more detailed and a little bit more, go the next layer down. So these are really useful, I think, and help us sort of give us direction around what we want to do. But let's talk about today. The agenda today, the flow of events. I'm going to introduce our wonderful experts, our speakers in a minute, Mike Van Clef and Samantha Bean. I'll introduce them formally. But then after that, we will also talk a little bit about a project called the National Wildlife Federation's Community Habitat Program. And Emily, who's one of our commission members, has kindly agreed to just share a little bit of information about that. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. And at that time, really love to hear your thoughts. We want this to be sort of informal and more of a dialogue. It is a conversation. So we really love to hear your personal observations when it comes to greenscaping, or your ideas, or what you found works well, and also questions that you may have. And we want to make sure we have enough time for that at the end of the evening here. So with that, let me just say a few housekeeping things. We are recording today's session, so we will share a link to this, and you feel free to please pass that on to those that can't attend today. This is a Zoom event, so please go on mute until the very end, otherwise you're going to get a lot of background noise. So really appreciate that. And with that, let me move to our first speaker, Mike Van Clef. And so let me just share a little bit about Mike, Dr. Mike Van Clef. Mike is and I think many people know Mike. He's well known in our community, as is Samantha. But Mike is the Stewardship Director at Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space, or FOVOS. And he's led critical work across New Jersey in invasive species management, deer management, and habitat restoration. Mike's been a strong voice in conservation policy, helping shape statewide legislation on invasive plants. And Mike brings not only academic knowledge, but decades of practical experience working with communities like ours. So very interested to hear more from Mike about this, and please join me in welcoming Mike. Thank you, Mike, so much for being part of this program. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you. Just wanted to start out with a beautiful meadow here to give you a little inspiration. This was taken by one of our former staff, Rachel. So yes, a meadow can look that good. Slide. So yeah, I mean, I think I try to set the stage, you know, why do we care? Why should we care? And there's a lot of really, really good things in New Jersey. And this is a sampling from across the state. But there's a significant amount of natural beauty in New Jersey. Slide. So yeah, example, 2,000 native species, you know, bellworts and mountain laurels and royal ferns and service berries, clematis, blueberries. There's all kinds of great things, and many of these things can work in your yard. Slide. And I've been accused of being slightly biased towards plants, and that is 100% true. But you know, there's lots of great animals out there too. So again, this is sort of statewide, but you know, you can see the numbers yourself there. There's a lot of diversity in New Jersey, and some wild things out there. There's still black bears and rattlesnakes and things like that in New Jersey. Bog turtles, they're federally listed in New Jersey as a stronghold. On the upper right, there's northern meadowlark butterflies, which are globally rare, again, with a stronghold in New Jersey. So again, you know, just I think it's easy living in New Jersey to believe our own negative hype and the negative hype of others outside of New Jersey, but don't believe it. There's lots of good things here. Slide. So, you know, one of the key things is what do we hope to see? What should we be seeing? You know, so we should be seeing healthy forests. And this is just, you know, all of those words on the slide aside, there should be something from the bottom all the way to the top, right at the ground layer and all the layers in between. So you have an herb layer, you have seedlings and shrubs, then you have a subcanopy, then you have a canopy. All that structure should be here. And one of the key problems, the largest problem we have, is deer overabundance, which means that in most places that understory is not filled with native plants that are preferable for deer to eat. So what do we do about that? Next. Yeah, so when I'm being negative, I try to have a pretty picture behind it. But you know, this is what we've done. We've destroyed habitat. It's not the deer's fault. We've created a problem of overabundant deer, invasive species, soil modifications from past agriculture, altered fire regimes, stream flows, habitat fragmentation, climate change. So it's a massive list of massive problems. And when you're a steward, the first thing you say is, okay, well, I could try to, you know, mitigate some of these problems on the scale of a preserve or a residential property or whatever. What are the things we can do something about? So we can do something about overabundant deer. We can do something about invasive species. We could add native plants back into the mix. So there's things we can do at the scale of standing on the land. And that's what we're trying to do and encourage others to do. Slide. So yeah, again, just a statewide perspective here. About half of our land is still in natural cover. So, you know, but the problem is, oh, it looks like my slide got static, but the amount of change that's happened over a very short period of time is absolutely tremendous. So the amount of development that's occurred, the invasive species problem is relatively new. I'll talk about that in a minute. Deer overabundance, again, in nature's point of view, is relatively recent, you know, 50 years or so. Again, from nature's point of view, that's instant almost. And we're changing, you know, things obviously change, right? There's been glaciers, they've come and gone. The time scale at which they move, though, is extremely long. You know, so natural systems have a chance to react. When you do it real fast, all hell breaks loose and systems start to fail. Slide. So, for example, deer overabundance. So this is the Hopewell Valley. The green is forest. The tan is non-forest, so it could be developed or ag. Deer love this. We literally have, from a deer's point of view, we live in deer nirvana. It is absolutely perfect for deer. So they like all the edges. If this was all deep forest, if this whole slide of the picture of the valley were all green, there'd be instantly less deer. They're not forest creatures as much as they are edge species. So we have excellent deer. We don't have sufficient deer management. Large, something like 40% of the valley isn't accessible or there's no hunting on it. And when we do have hunting, for the most part, it's recreational hunting, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't help really get the deer numbers down. It tends to maintain, and we're maintaining at a very high level. And then you get all the impacts, health impacts, economic and ecological damage. Slide. So yeah, what are invasive species doing? You know, in the good old days, and old enough that there was a point where I was seeing this when I was a student or just before I was a student. If you abandon a field, the species in yellow are just a small sample of what you would get as the field recovered into natural habitat. Now we often get just one species, autumn olive, for example. Now, if you're be in the month of May in an area infested with autumn olive, all is good. When it's June and it's all autumn olive, you're moving on or you're dying. Same with the fruit. Tons of fruit in September, October, high on the hog. But I don't know if anyone noticed, most living things need to eat more than just 2 months out of the entire year. So, it just messes things up. It breaks the food web. All of those native species, they had fruit, flowers, seeds all throughout the entire calendar year, which is sustaining for diversity. So we've really simplified chunks of our landscape, making it less hospitable for many native species, insects and birds. Slide. Yeah, so, and it's not a coincidence, the timing. The deer densities over time coincide with the proliferation of invasive species. So in pre-European times, it was estimated to be 10 per square mile. Around 1972, it was just over 10 per square mile. By the 2020 timeframe, we were over 100 deer per square mile. So that is just absolutely devastating for all the natural areas that remain. And yeah, you can go back into the old floras, descriptions of old floras from the 50s, and they mentioned just a couple invasives, and they weren't taking over the entire landscape at that time. You add deer, they subtract all the native species they can get to, leave blanks. Those blanks are going to be filled by invasive species very quickly. An invasive species has attributes of weediness, and most importantly, just about every last invasive species is not eaten by deer. So it's not a coincidence. The timing isn't a coincidence. So we've fostered an overabundant deer population, which really exasperated the invasive species problem. Slide. Yeah, as far as things you can do, we put out a do not plant list that we update every year after our technical advisory committee meets. So these are species. There's no legislation in New Jersey to prevent the sale of invasives. You can voluntarily not purchase plants that we put on our list. Slide. So why are private lands important? So we did planning a dozen or more years ago, and mapping out where the open space was protected, and it was just like, wow, there's a lot of blanks. And those blanks or non-preserved land are private lands. 70% of the valley. So if our mission is to protect the Hopewell Valley, and all we think about is our own preserves, we're totally failing. So, private lands became something that, hey, we got to do something if we're going to meet our mission. We can't just hide on our preserves. Slide. So, very quickly, we have over 300 participants now, large range of property sizes, and 4,000 acres enrolled. Our goal is to get up to 800 households. We haven't been meeting that goal, quite honestly, and we're actually now in a process where we're trying to figure out what we can do. Is there other ways that we can interact? Resources that we could supply to encourage more people to join. So we really want this to get much larger than it is, and we're going to start working more diligently on doing that. Slide. So yeah, you can do various things. You could have native plant gardens we help with, meadow and forest conservation, wildlife conservation. That's primarily through our kestrel nest box program, deer management if it's feasible on a particular property, and invasive species management. Slide. So yeah, with the native plant gardens, there's a home visit, and this is for members of Phobos. You get a home visit, you get a customized list of native plants and where on your particular property particular species could do well. We do have a good amount of resources, but we needed to do it a little bit better, like I was saying. And one of the good features we have is pooled wholesale orders. So you can get a huge savings. And the point was from the beginning, it was like, if you're going to spend X number of dollars, we want to maximize how many plants you get for that number of dollars. And the way to do that is through wholesale orders. You can't go to a wholesaler and say, I want 3 of something. That doesn't work. But when you pool a bunch of orders, now you can approach a wholesale and they're like, okay, that's a significant number of plants. We'll let you buy through us. And it has over, we're just at the 70,000 plant that people have purchased through us. Slide. So how do you use native plants in your yard? So there's options, always options. You can have anything from a formal garden to a meadow, and anything in between. So the lower right photo is from my backyard when one of my meadows was new. And if you give it a shape, all of a sudden it becomes what I call, and it's not really a joke, socially acceptable. It's socially acceptable, even if you're in an area that everyone has prim and proper turf. If you want a meadow patch, you know, make it a defined shape so people know that nature is still under control. It makes too many people feel better when they have that. It doesn't look like you just abandoned the property. It has a shape. Okay, everything's cool. So you could do that at any size. It could be 10 square feet, 100 square feet, 1,000 square feet. But when you have a shape to it, it becomes easier for your neighbors who are not maybe so conservation minded to sort of buy in and accept it. Slide. So there's other types of things, meadow patches, foundation plantings, there's, you know, all different purposes, and there's native plants for all of these things. You know, I have another talk that I do where I go into all the different kinds of plants that could work for those different settings. But I just wanted to throw that out there that, you know, there's no situation where you can't get native plants in. Slide. So given an example, I have two examples, lawn to meadow was the first one. And I think these slides will be available if I don't, you know, hit all of this in too much detail. But, you know, one option, I was just at someone's house today, they just stopped mowing. And they mowed trails through an area, some portion of their lawn. It wasn't the whole thing, although they have a very large lawn. They took a significant portion of that and just stopped mowing. When you let turf grass grow, all of a sudden it becomes habitat. Lawn is not habitat. Those lawn grasses and even the lawn weeds that are in there, they start to become habitat. So you could do that, and it's fast, and you've saved money, right? You're not mowing it. So you could then build diversity over time. So it's a way to get a larger area in the mix of the ecosystem quickly. And then you could spot, you know, within that larger area, you can have little spots that where you have to kill the grass. If you want to plant native seeds or plant native wildflower or grass plugs, that's great, but you do have to get rid of the grass that's there before you put them in. You can do that either using herbicides or tarps. There's rules of thumb. If you want to sort of beat the weeds that'll come in, you probably want to go 25 square feet. However, whatever the square footage is, double that for plugs. And that'll keep a really nice, tight, dense growing patch that will keep other things you don't want out. And then mow annually, preferably around 8 inches or above. And the mowing just keeps trees and shrubs from establishing. Whether you leave the brown stalks up all winter, that's, you know, up to you. Leaving them up serves a great ecological purpose. There are birds from the north of us that come to us for their winter. New Jersey is their winter place. If you leave them up, all the seeds and stuff that they made over the winter feed those winter birds. So it's great. You know, so if you are okay with it sort of looking dead, it looks dead to us, but not to a dark-eyed junco. It looks very alive to them. Next. And the option 2 is go for it all at once. So same method, you could use herbicide or tarps to get rid of whatever area you want to turn into meadow. Just clean the slate. Same rules of thumb if you're using plugs, to take the square feet, double it, that's the amount of plugs that you want to put in. You know, seeds are a little bit harder of a challenge. I will just say that right up front, but it's not impossible. And if your area is really large, there's only so many plugs you can plant. So, you know, you could resort to plugs. Nothing is absolute. You could do plugs and seeds. I often recommend do plugs, and then in all the spaces between, throw down like a guaranteed winner of a germinator like Black-Eyed Susan, and have that fill up all the empty spaces in that first year. So yeah, those are just some of the options, just very broadly. But yeah, it could be as simple as stop mowing. Slide. And I can't resist. I'll throw in some plant pictures, but I'll move quickly. But yeah, milkweeds are fantastic. Butterfly purple, common, they're all fantastic and great for monarchs, obviously, right? So, and monarchs are incredibly good at finding them. They will find them if you plant them. Slide. More pollinated, all kinds of pollinators. It isn't just about monarchs with milkweeds, all kinds of pollinators come in. Slide. Foxglove beer tongue, and these are all species that are deer resistant. A fantastic plant for bumblebees. Slide. Virginia mountain mint, also not eaten by deer. There's different species of butterflies that are, they serve as a host plant for them, and they are fantastic for pollinators. Slide. Wild bergamot, also, deer resistant. It's in the mint group. Beautiful pink purple flowers. You'll see lots of tiger swallowtails on them. Slide. So another thing is tree islands. These are very common in on landscapes. Personally, they're a lost opportunity for the most part. I mean, it's like, yep, I don't want to mow right up to my tree, or it creates so much shade, the grass doesn't grow great there anyway. So they're great opportunities for natives. So you could do, just a couple quick examples. If you go back 1 second. Yeah. So if you wanted a simple mass planting, just green, lush, not necessarily wildflowers, Pennsylvania sedge, northern sea oats, ostrich fern, none of those are eaten by deer. You'll get a nice green, lush look out of it. Or you could have a shade meadow kind of thing, and I'll just show you some of those options. You can make it more complicated, and what I call it a shade meadow. You could have the same meadow concepts, but using shade plants. Slide. Yep, so miterwort and foam flower are their ground covers, very nice. They're good for, these small little pollinators that you almost would never notice unless you really look hard. So these are neat native plants for that situation, or any shade situation. Slide. Cardinal flower, you will get hummingbirds. They are the most vibrant red you've ever seen in your life. Normally they grow along the edges of water and wetlands. So that's another good choice. Again, deer don't eat this one. Slide. Wild bleeding heart, same thing, deer don't eat. And all kinds of just ecology just starts happening, right? The picture with the ant on the bottom there, the seeds of a bleeding heart have a little there's a fat body called an elaiosome, and that's how they get around. They attract ants that will want to eat the fat. They pull it back to their nest, and they leave it in a pile of fertilizer, aka ant poo, and that lets the seed germinate better. So there's so many things that are going on out there. Why not give yourself an opportunity to see some right in your own yard? Slide. Columbine, it's just, you can't deny it. It's an amazingly beautiful plant, and it's great for all the early color. Slide. So yeah, I will mention that we have, this is a fun thing if you're a bit of a foodie. We have a potluck social every October in Hopewell, and this year it's going to be on October 11th from noon to 2. Bring your favorite dish. We loosen the restrictions, so to speak. It isn't just forage stuff. If you want to bring something else, bring something else. One year someone brought an amazing Italian layout and stuffed shells and all kinds of good stuff. But typically it's something from nature, fruits, pawpaw or persimmon made into pastries or something like that. Venison dishes, of course, for protein kind of stuff, mushroom related dishes. So it's kind of really fun if you're interested. Yeah, please come. It's a large place with plenty of parking, so we can have a lot of people there. slide. Yep.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. I mean, that's awesome. A lot of useful information there. I'm going to stop sharing so so Samantha can put her slides up. A lot of really good information there. And thanks so much also for making your slides available. We will put that up on our borough website so people can download that. I also really interested in what Phobos offers, the home visit. Maybe you can talk about that at the end, but I'd love to hear more about that. But let's move on. Thank you so much, Mike. We'll come back to talk to you in a little bit. Let's move and introduce Samantha. So we're really fortunate to have Samantha join us, and Samantha is the voice behind Flutter By Meadows. And I hope you check that out. She will, I'm sure, talk a little bit about that. Samantha is a nature writer. She's a photographer. She's a native plant advocate. And she lives right here amongst us in Hopewell Valley. And so we're really lucky to have her. And over the past couple of years, she's transformed her own yard into what I think is a really nice patchwork of meadows, rain gardens, and wildlife habitats. And so she has a lot of experience in this area. And what I love about Samantha's story is that it's not just about the plants, it's about rediscovering the connection with our environment. And she writes beautifully in her blogs and Instagram about not only science, but her lived experience around this. And so I think she's going to share a little bit about that tonight. And so really happy that she's joined us. So thank you so much. And welcome, Samantha, to our small gathering. Let me hand it over to you. We can see your slides perfectly.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you are all here, and that hopefully my slides are clear enough for everyone to see. And I'm really thrilled to be here, especially tonight, to be a part of this talk. It happens to be National Wildlife Day, which I think is fantastic for us all to celebrate. And I love seeing all those pictures of bees and those lovely flowers that Mike was showing. So I'm so glad you're all here. I wanted to also send a shout out thank you to the person who got me started on this route that I'm on right now, which is, his name is David Hughes, and he's out of Weatherwood Design in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. So I just wanted to say a thank you to him. So let me introduce myself. I am not a landscape designer. I'm actually, as was mentioned earlier, I am a writer. So everything I've shared on my blog and everything I hope to share with you here today sprang out of curiosity and attention to details, not so much blueprints. My childhood dream put me behind the desk as a proofreader, not as a writer as I had hoped at the time. But years later, I found my voice here at Flutter By Meadows, where my words emerged when I started paying attention to the seasonal trends and the native plants and shrubs that were added to our home landscape. And I became truly fascinated by what I was seeing. I learned the word phenology, which starts with the letters PH. I highly encourage you to look it up. That's a fascinating word. And ever since I learned that word, I became even more hooked than I already was. But I will say, along the way, I noticed that missing from some home gardens was the voice of nature, and that's what I'm hoping to share with you here tonight. Oftentimes, we see plants that bloom for a very short period of time. We see checkerboard turf, we see perfect lines, but a garden's timeline should extend far beyond the growing season. It shouldn't just end when the weather stops being warm. And I came to see that the discovery that I was experiencing, not the design, was bringing something much richer. I noticed that plants were starting to reseed themselves. I noticed that insects were finding pathways like that ant that Mike just talked about. I was learning about birds that returned to my yard because there was a place for them. I was learning about the insects that were overwintering in the leaves. And I realized that that's how beauty and function were happening in my garden. And I was really wanting to share that with whoever would listen. So that's kind of how I started my blog. And my Instagram and wanted to share my story with everyone who would listen. And it was almost 10 years ago. I want to share a little back history story for you. I was in my yard about 10 years ago, like I said. I wasn't really looking for anything in particular, and I noticed this bird on a post that I didn't recognize. I had never seen the bird before in my life. And I stopped in my tracks and I looked like curiously at it. I was like, what are you? And my eyes went real wide and my heart was pounding. So I was thinking, what the heck am I looking at? And I didn't know it at the time, but that tiny bird was about to change everything. So we had just finished the process of seeding a meadow in our backyard, which was an HOA-owned detention basin. And I realized at that moment, when I looked up in a bird book, or if it was Google at the time, I don't remember, I realized that that bird had arrived and he was all the way from either Central America or possibly even South America. And I was completely in awe. And I said, I want that to happen again. I want to learn more about what's finding my yard, what's changing, what's growing, why are they coming? And that chance encounter became what I like to call my spark moment, or my ignition to the flame, if you will. And when I realized that I was shifting my yard from yard work to discovery, from conventional maintenance to ecological curiosity, and I was just rethinking about what does it actually mean to grow a garden. And I also happen to call the arrival of this bird in my yard now the first day of spring. So whenever they arrive, to me, that's the first day of spring. But I realized that I was also creating space for life to return. So this slow, steady transformation of my yard, I wanted to cling to that feeling every day, not just with the birds, but with pollinators, with insects, with anything that I could learn about and discover. And so I started thinking, what about, instead of always having a garden be designed for curb appeal, we planted it for other reasons? What if it was a garden that we planted with the intention for discovery? And that rush of excitement that I felt when I looked at that bird for the first time was something I was really hoping to get to again. And so when we begin to garden with nature, not against it, we stop designing for ourselves and we begin designing it for nature. We start providing a year-round food source for wildlife and pollinators and creating dynamic landscapes that mimic the natural patterns. And if we do that, well, what happens? But before we answer that, we need to first start with, what is the definition of a garden? Is it, oops, hold on. I think I skipped a slide. Did I skip a slide? No, I didn't. Yeah, so what happens when we do garden with nature? So we have to think about, when we ask that question, what do we define a beautiful garden as? Is it one that looks good? Is it squared off? Is it constantly being watered and constantly being mowed? Or is it one that feeds the soil, shelters the birds, and is constantly full of life? So I was thinking maybe we rethink what's considered beautiful and plant with purpose. Let's flip that switch, as they say, on the perfect lawn and bagging up every fallen leaf like it's trash, and do something a little different. So, but when we think about what the word greenscaping is, to me, it means a lot more than just removing turf or lawn, as they say. It's about, to me, it's about replacing what's empty with what's alive. It's about a shift in how we think about beauty and function. There's a lot to it. There's water conservation, there's protecting and providing for wildlife, but it's also about sustainable practices that make for a healthy ecosystem and pollinator habitat. It's an understanding that the host plant that we planted in our yard is providing the entire life cycle for the monarch butterfly. It's seeing that entire life cycle just happen, and knowing that a chewed leaf is a sign of life, not a sign of imperfection. So what exactly, how would you define greenscaping? So it's a multitude of things, and most of you, I'm sure, have a general idea on your mind about what it is. Otherwise, you may not have clicked on the Zoom link button to be here. There are plenty of ways to describe what it is. It's a set of landscaping practices that allow nature to work for you in your yard. using plantings that are native to your area, practicing water conservation, and most importantly, avoiding harsh chemicals. It's not, I don't think it's one set thing, but more of a series of transformations that helps turn a lawn into a more vibrant, diverse, biodiverse greenscape that benefits not only nature, but also the people who live in and around it. So this is a picture of my rain garden, kind of a before and after, if you will. So you can see on the left side, there was a lot of pooling water on the lawn that was just sort of gathering after a heavy rainstorm. And we wanted to fix that. We said, you know, this isn't right. There's obviously the downslope of our driveway contributing to that. And so we installed a rain garden to help mitigate that flooding issue. And it's definitely been helping a lot. So like I said, this was our front lawn back in 2016. It did not do a very good job of handling storms because the roots of grass are very shallow. They cannot percolate through the ground. The water can't percolate through the ground. Instead, the water just kind of sits there. And then in the worst case, it'll just flood right back up again. So we added this rain garden, I believe it was 2016 or 2017. And the deep roots of all the plants that we added are doing a fantastic job in this space because those roots of those native plants are so deep and they act as just, you know, they just suck that water in and just absorb it very well. But more than that, it's also a seasonal symphony, I like to call it. It changes week to week. There's new blooms, there's new shrubs that come into bloom, and it's a changing tapestry from March all the way well until October. So a rain garden is one example of greenscaping, but I would say no two rain gardens would ever be the same. You have to think about the soil composition is going to be different. So my yard might be different than someone in Bucks County, for example. And also rain gardens vary greatly in size. They can be small and they can also be quite large as well. And that they don't have to have trees in them. Ours is unique in that it does. These are ash trees, so we are pretty certain they're not going to last too much longer, but we have been treating them for the ash borer. So just as our seasons change, as does the plants in our rain garden continually change as well. So what I like to think about when I walk through the rain garden is how much, like I said, how much it changes. And I kind of equate it to looking at a storybook. So what if your yard wasn't just a space? But what if you were looking at a story? What might you discover if you really looked into your yard? We had no idea that this would happen to us on our space. Actually, Mike Van Clef came out to our property about 10 years ago. He did one of those walkthroughs with us and got us set forward on the right path. And our biggest thing was we wanted less lawn to look at. So this picture you can see is the where the tree line is sort of the dividing line between our property and the HOA detention basin, which is what we wanted to change. So we got a lot of permits from the township, and we got the neighbors and the HOA to both okay it. And we planted a meadow. And we didn't set out at that moment to greenscape our entire space all at once. We weren't like, oh my gosh, let's fix our entire house and greenscape it to a fare thee well. But over time, the growth of the native plants and trees flourished into a constant and evolving script, like that story I was talking about. The birds found shelter and food. I had to learn new types of birds that I'd never seen before. And then in that process, I found this amazing seasonal cast of characters that I was able to script a story with basically all year long, which was fantastic. Here's one of our bird friends, a downy woodpecker. So if we started asking new questions about gardens, we can start to see beauty emerge in newfound places. And I started to ask the question of not asking the question, what looks tidy or what's neat and proper, but what belongs here? Not what the question of what grows fast, but what supports life. So I was replacing the common garden questions that people are looking at of, is it neat? Is it tidy? Is it exotic? With ecology-focused alternatives. I was shifting my perspective to native plants so that what I noticed was how I defined beauty and what returns, what insects returned, what layers of life were growing, how the seasons were changing from month to month. And I started to look at my yard much differently because so much was happening, and it was every day. It wasn't just May through August. It was literally every day. So we, over time, in a patchwork of replacement plantings, the flowers themselves became alive with life and movement. I wasn't just looking at flowers. I was looking at bumblebees. I was looking at warblers. I was looking at hummingbirds. I was looking at bats. Butterflies I wanted to learn the names of. Birds I started to have to identify by sound because I knew they were there. I just couldn't often see them. So I had to sort of cue my brain to be like, okay, what sound am I hearing? What bird is that? And through the lens of native plants, what this gave to me is a reimagined look at what beauty and purpose was in a garden. Mike mentioned the dark-eyed junco that comes to our area in New Jersey for the winter. And lo and behold, I didn't know he was going to mention that bird, but he's one of our, visitors that sort of kicks off autumn for me. And he likes our meadow because we leave some of the, we leave habitat islands for them to forage and look for things. And I realized that this bird had been coming to New Jersey my whole life. I've lived in New Jersey my whole life, but I had never known about this bird till I started paying attention in my own yard. And it took time. I mean, it wasn't instant. I didn't all of a sudden, become this bird person that could identify left and right what I was seeing. But every year more life returned, and every year I wanted to learn more. And now our garden is a rhythm of the seasons. There's always something to notice, something that's changing. The day these birds return, the day these birds leave, it's like one day they're gone. And like I said, it's not something that only is happening in our yard in the growing season. As a writer, I challenged myself to write for 14 days straight in December, just to sit at the laptop and write whatever I was inspired to write. And I actually was able to write of things happening in my yard, whether it was about a kinglet or the fog that lasted for 14 hours straight. I ended up writing for 21 days, not 14. So I was very impressed that my yard was able to provide me with that much content that I never ran out of things to write about. Let's see, where am I? So, and as we've been showing a lot of pictures of these flowers and these plants and trees and shrubs, they're not just pretty. That's not their whole goal in life, is to be pretty. They're the foundation, their food, their shelter, their seasonal habitat. Their whole vibe is ecological, not just let's look tidy and let's make it look good. Native plants foster biodiversity with low water and chemical needs, while drawing wildlife and pollinators that require them. And like literally flock to them, you could say, as this northern mockingbird was in my rain garden, eating some berries off of a shrub. So as I was going along and as my blog was evolving and as I was learning more, the shift, like I said, it continues 365 days a year. And it's important to remember that a native plant garden blooms differently than a traditional one or a conventional garden. There's something called successional planting, and Mike had that slide that was showing how there's fruit, seeds, berries all throughout the year. And that's really important because plants that bloom in April will give way to other plants that bloom in May and then in June, and then that cycle continues. And there's either insects on those plants, or there might be berries, or there might be nectar. So it's in a constantly evolving, the term, think of it as kind of I don't know how to describe it, but I guess successional is the best word I can use, as it continues to bloom and provide seasonal interest. And that seasonal interest is for the animals as much as it is for the gardener as well, in providing a year-round food source. And that seasonal tapestry is actually mimicking natural patterns that were here long before, you know, all those invasives and all the deer came in and sort of annihilated what was already around. And the garden, as I look at it, is constantly in motion. I'm always trying to learn new names of plants. I still don't know all of them, and I may never know all of them. But the native plants in my garden help me think about not just what a garden is, but who it's for. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail with the gardening for wildlife topic. But going back to my question this was the garden I discovered, and it wasn't all at once. I did it bit by bit, plant by plant, bird by bird, insect by insect, butterfly by butterfly. You know, like I said, I grew up in New Jersey, and it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s or maybe even later that I even knew we had ruby-throated hummingbirds. Like, I've gone my whole life almost not knowing that that bird was even here. And that was kind of a shock to me. And I didn't, when I started, you know, my blog and this native plant journey, I wasn't someone who set out to become, you know, deeply involved in soil layers. And I wasn't thinking I was going to watch bees land on flowers like it was a morning ritual. And yet here I am. Native plants, they started to change how I saw everything, how I thought about time, how I thought about space, and what it means for a yard to be beautiful. And that question, you know, about what I asked about what happens, it's when everything began to shift. It's when I used to see not just everything as yard work, but I started to see everything as stewardship of the land. Many times I'll walk out to get my mail, and this happens to be right along the way, that rain garden, and I find myself, instead of stopping, or instead of getting the mail right away, I continually find myself stopping and just listening and watching. And I find myself walking into the garden, not through it. What do I mean by that? So it's a discovered garden. It's not just visual beauty, but it's this sensory richness, it's movement, it's sound. It's not just a summer highlight. It's even in the winter, there'll be, you know, little sounds or something happening, or even the silence. The silence is magical in winter, especially after a snowfall. And then there's always things happening that I can't even see, that I have no idea that they are happening. That's especially true when you plant a meadow and you watch it bloom over time. Thank goodness I had the foresight to take these photographs. That is something they don't tell you when you plant native plants. Be sure to get lots of memory on your phone, because you will be taking tons of photographs. You heard it from me first. So that's the hardest part, is much of the growth that you're seeing when you plant a meadow is happening below the surface. So you're waiting and wanting, and you're like, why isn't it growing? Why isn't it doing anything? But it's because our mentality is so about like rushed and hurriedness, and I want it now, and I want it out of the box and planted in the ground. I want it to be beautiful. Only that's not how native plants work. They have a very patient process that they must do. And that instant need for change and removing, you know, the summer flowers and putting in a fall blooming potted plant, that's just design. That's not how we discover anything. One second. So one of the things I like to think about when it comes time for seasons to change is I think about how patient nature is. And this quote I love so much: adopt the pace of nature, her secret is patience. The simple act, these 4 pictures I'm showing on this slide are the 4 kind of growing processes of a butterfly milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa. And I have in the upper left hand shot is when the plant growing in the yard is only about maybe as tall as a toothpick. It's very, very small. And then it gets a little bit bigger. And then by July, you've got these amazing monarchs that find it and use it for nectaring and use it for their butterfly, for their caterpillars. And then even more magical to me is coming out this time of year and maybe even a little bit later, and you've got these little seed heads just blowing in the breeze. And it's so amazing to watch. And I wish for you to have that same journey in your greenscaping, in your garden of discovery, to see how that evolves and shifts. And then I will let Emily talk a little bit about the national or the Certified Wildlife Habitat Program that I also certified my yard with, which is a super fun thing to do. And she'll give you some tips and tricks on how to get yourself started on this amazing national program, but it's also in Pennington and Hopewell and in Hopewell Valley, kind of a more concentrated thing that we're trying to work on together. So to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I'll switch content here. What an amazing story you conveyed there. And I think it's really amazing to think about the choices that we make in our own yards can really transform how we will live with nature. And I think you really framed it well, and talking about our gardens and reframing the way that we think about our gardens even, it was something that I really connected with. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me try and switch to share the slides for Emily. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Just need to
So
scroll.
yeah, let me just scroll through this content here. Give me a second. So before we move to the portion where we want to really open this up to hear your comments and thoughts and observations and maybe questions, really wanted to highlight one exciting opportunity for our community that Samantha touched on. And as some of you may know, the National Wildlife Federation, they run a program called Community Wildlife Habitats. And it's a program for towns like ours to create our own wildlife-friendly habitats, from back gardens to community spaces. And Emily has been looking into this, and we're really, really happy that she has kindly agreed to share a little bit about this with us and give us a quick overview about the program and what she's learned. It's a voluntary program. So Emily, can I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kieran. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily, and I'm on the Pennington Environmental Commission. I want to start by thanking Mike and Samantha for all of this incredibly valuable information that they shared with us today. As Samantha mentioned, this presentation happens to land on National Wildlife Day. I mean, how wonderful is that? I'm thrilled to share a simple but powerful way that greenscaping your yard can support wildlife right from your own home. As Kieran just explained, it's called the Certified Community Wildlife Habitat Program, and it was created by the National Wildlife Federation. It's designed for homeowners, schools, and communities who want to make a real impact. It's important to note that you don't need a huge yard or a perfect garden, just a commitment to supporting wildlife. The National Wildlife Federation provides a checklist and online form to guide you through the process, and I'm going to walk you through it on this call. Once you're certified, you'll receive a beautiful yard sign like Samantha has and like you see here, and it's a great way to spark conversations and inspire your neighbors to try to get certified as well. Karen, can you go to the next slide? Okay, the certification process. To get your yard certified, you'll need to provide 5 key elements. These 5 elements are simple, effective, attainable, and straightforward. The first is food, so just as we've talked about, native plants, bird feeders, nectar sources. Number 2 is water. Think bird baths, ponds, or even shallow dishes. For number 3, cover, which would be shrubs, brush piles, or trees for shelter. Number 4 is places to raise young, so a nesting box, host plants, or even dense vegetation. And number 5 would be sustainable practices, which could be composting, mulching, or reducing chemical use. As natural habitats shrink, even small green spaces can become vital sanctuaries for birds, butterflies, bees, and other wildlife. By providing these 5 key elements, you're actively creating intentional habitat zones, helping restore migratory corridors, supporting pollinators, and finding a way to reconnect with nature right outside your door. Additionally, When multiple homes in a neighborhood certify, it contributes to our larger community wildlife habitat program designation. That means our town and the greater Hopewell Valley can be recognized nationally for its commitment to conservation. It's a wonderful way to build pride, educate others, and create a lasting change together as a community. If you're interested in doing this, we'll follow up with a link to the website that has the checklist and steps to get certified. We also post about this on our Facebook page. And if you're on the Pennington Borough eBlast email list, you've probably received communication about this, but as a follow-up, we'll be able to send that out as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. And I think this is a really nice program. Of course, it's voluntary. And if you have questions, we can talk more about it, and we'll share more content with this. So just as Emily said, really want to thank Mike and Samantha for sharing really inspiring perspectives on this. And we'd now like to open up the conversation to hear perhaps your thoughts and your comments. Maybe you have questions. So what we'd like to do is to ask a question. If you could use the raise hand feature in Zoom, Robin, who's on the call, will then bring you into the meeting, and you can ask a question or make your observation or comment. Please introduce yourself and where you're joining from. And also, please don't be limited in any way in your questions or your observations. You know, even the simplest questions, you throw light on things, because not all of us are up to speed on this type of thing. So with that, let me see if there are any questions, and maybe Robin can help bring them into the conversation. But
Okay.
maybe while people are thinking, maybe I could ask a question first to both either Samantha or Mike, really around, you know, if someone is listening tonight and wants to try greenscaping but only has a small yard, where would you suggest we start, or that person start in sort of thinking about greenscaping?
I could answer that, because I actually I just thought about this the other day. There, you can have a very, very small area to greenscape in. And one thing I would suggest is put it, whether it's a series of containers or if it's just a small mulch bed, put it in a place where you either walk by often or you look out at often. So whether it's like your favorite chair in your living room that you can look out and see that particular spot, I would encourage you to do that, because you're going to want to constantly kind of check in on it and see how it's doing. You're going to need, you know, in the growing season, maybe as it gets started, you might need to water it. And it would just be more enjoyable. I think that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with our rain garden so early on, is because I would always walk past it every day or drive past it on my way out of the house. And yeah, native plants can grow in a container. Absolutely. It's slightly more challenging because they will need more care and more water than in their natural element. But I don't know, Mike, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, it really can be surprising how little it takes to bring something good in. You know, it doesn't take a little patch of cardinal flower. You're likely to catch a hummingbird's attention. Obviously, the more the better, but you know, don't be discouraged if you don't have a lot of room. Just use every bit that you can. And container gardens, yeah, I mean, I think that's the one you mentioned. The one key thing is you do have to take care of them a little bit more, because those deep roots aren't going to get that deep in a container, so you might have to water it a little bit more.
If you need any inspiration, just take a look at the High Line in Manhattan, and I saw a monarch on top of that when I was there in August. So if a monarch can find Midtown Manhattan in the High Line district, they can find your yard here in Hopewell Valley. I guarantee it.
There you go.
Thanks a lot. Robin, do we have anybody online that wants to join?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring over Andy Jackson.
Okay.
Hi there. Hello, Mike. Thanks very much for your presentation. Mike and I go back a long way into FOVAS.
Hey, Andy.
And I thought Samantha's presentation was extremely interesting. I hadn't even thought of of that. I'm one of these people who will travel the world to see birds and plants, but I hate doing yard work. So how do I do the work, or how much work is required, and things like, I looked at a number of people who've done this. There's a few done it on River Road in Titusville, and quite often it's very difficult to determine they seem to have a lot of weeds. Now, do you differentiate between weeds and native plants, and how do you control weeds? And then my last question relates to last 6 weeks last fall, when we got no rain at all and everything died in my yard. How do you cope with a rain garden when you don't have water and then you have water restrictions? Do you have to start again? So it's mostly about the care, how much is involved. Are there any organizations? I mean, I have somebody who does my yard work. Do any specialize in installing and looking after rain gardens so that I can admire it and not have to break my back looking after it? Sorry to be so negative about the hard work, but there's other things to do with one's life.
Actually, what you bring up is an excellent question. And I think it should definitely be something that other people understand. A rain garden does not need rain in order to function as a rain garden, believe it or not. So yes, it has not rained here except for tonight for about 25 minutes. It hasn't rained much of maybe half of August. And the only part of my rain garden that I've had to take care of in that time is we have a planted willow oak that was just installed maybe 14 months ago to take the place of those ashes when they do expire. So we've had to water that willow oak because a willow oak obviously grows at a water's edge and it prefers wet feet, as they say. But a rain garden, you're putting plants in there that not only are absorbing that rainwater and can tolerate wet feet, but that doesn't mean that there's plants all throughout the rain garden that are always getting wet. So there's something called a berm, which is like an edge. So there'll be, there's the plants that are in the pool area, and then there's plants along the edge, which have different water requirements. Yes, there are organizations that specialize in this type of maintenance. There are not many. There it is a learning curve. There is people that are trying, and it's hopefully going to get much better over time. And how do I deal with weeds? So my biggest weed problem is stilt grass, and thankfully it's a very easy weed to pull, and it's extremely satisfying to pull. But yes, there is maintenance in a native plant garden for sure. You're going to have to watch out for things that pop in. Like, I mean, birds might put a seed in there that you don't want. You might have an autumn olive popping up in your rain garden. You're like, or in your other garden that's not supposed to be there. So you've got to kind of watch out that you don't have those invasives popping up. So there will be maintenance involved, but I wouldn't say I'm outside in my yard, 3 hours a week trying to maintain a weed population. So, Mike?
Yeah, I think I had in my slides, I had like options for using native plants. If you go with the formal garden look, you will be forever weeding, just like if it were non-native plants, because you're keeping it very structured, very organized. There's an expectation that this plant is there, the other plant is there. The meadows free you so much. A meadow patch, even if it's a small meadow patch, you don't have to worry about every last little thing that isn't how you planted it. Now you do, like Samantha just said, if there's key weeds that come in and you don't deal with them, it will wipe out all of your other plants. So mugwort, autumn olive, there's a variety of things. So it's really a matter of, it's helpful to know, and that kind of thing makes me think of a resource we should put on our website, is what are the key ones to look out for? So if you see one little mugwort that's starting from seed and know that that's mugwort and boop, pull it out, you just saved yourself a ton of future work and possibly total destruction of your meadow or garden patch. So it's helpful to know what the key things are. I mean, it's really the fundamental aspect of stewardship generally, even in purely natural areas. What are the key threats that I need to be worried about? If they're just starting, nip it in the bud. So I think accepting that sort of truly natural vibe where things are in a meadow and they change over time. Some plants, some of your native plantings are going to do better than some of your other native plantings because you happen to put it right in the sweet spot for species A and it's just okay for species B. and species A is going to become more abundant over time, and species B will decline over time. So, you know, that's just part of the flow, so to speak.
Thank you. Robin, is there anybody else that wants to make a comment or ask a question?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring over Joanne Held.
Unmute. Hello. Thank you for this program tonight. I'm really sparked a bunch of thoughts, and actually Emily just disappeared, but my question is kind of for Emily, but maybe somebody else can answer it. I've been trying to certify my yard for the, communities for wildlife, but I keep getting stuck on the water source. I mean, I don't, and the last option is have an ocean. I don't have an ocean. I don't have any kind of water body. I do have kind of a rain garden, but it's not wet all the time. So I don't know if that would qualify as a water source. So I'm wondering, how people address that problem of having the water source.
I can start and then I'm going to probably throw it over to my other presenters, but it could be something as simple as a tiny bird bath. You'd be surprised how much a bird bath can add to your garden and to your yard. Samantha and I always talk about you can have a bird feeder to see the birds, but what really gets them into your yard, the birds and the bees and a bunch of other little critters, is the bird bath itself. And there's a ton of options for size and height, and depth. You want to keep it kind of shallow because they're, when bees come to drink water, they need it shallow for them to be able to get back out of it. And there's also a recommendation of putting rocks within your bird bath so that they can sit and rest and drink, or sticks sometimes. But okay, I'm going to throw it over to the experts, but that's my suggestion.
Samantha, do you have any perspective on that, given that you've certified?
I do actually. So yes, a small bird bath is absolutely totally legit, and they will accept that. The other thing we have in our yard, which the birds seem to really enjoy, is we have a boulder that we got at a rock quarry, I guess you call it, that just has a kind of like it's almost like a dish, like the rock dropped and part of the rock popped out. So there's just this depression in the rock. And I keep it filled year round, and the birds absolutely love it. The other thing you can do for the summer months is what's called a mister, which is just a small hose that sprays a small trickle of water out. I don't know if that would qualify for kind of a year-round thing, but the hummingbirds seem to enjoy it. And even just a saucer of a terracotta pot. I mean, honestly, that the birds will find that. I mean, it's just the important part is just to keep it clean. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a full pond or a full, ocean, so to speak.
Thank you.
And can I also, Kieran, you said you're going to circle back to the whole Phobos community gardens and how to get involved. I'm anxious to hear about that too.
Yeah, love that opportunity, Mike, for that you described. How do we participate in that?
Yeah, so if you're a member already, you're ready to rip. You can just contact us and we'll set up an appointment and I'll come over. If you're not a member, yeah, you just have to become a member. And I'm not exactly sure how that flow works, but often I'll get an email forwarded to me internally within Phobos, so with someone saying, hey, I just joined and I want to get a visit and find out about native plants. So it gets back to me somehow. Or you can email me directly. I'm sure, my email's on the website if you're a member, and if you're not, become a member, and then I'll come out.
A couple of months ago, Mike actually visited my friend's house and garden in Hopewell, and we had so much fun walking around, and he just let me ask a million It wasn't even my garden, and Mike was just walking around and answering so many questions, identifying things, talking about which plant would do really well in which area of the garden, in certain areas of light and shade. He really is such an expert, and to have him come out is so helpful.
It's kind of, you're just encouraging me to talk about native plants, and At some point, you'll just have to say, yeah, Mike, I got to go to work now. Eventually I'll leave.
Awesome. Robin, anyone else?
I was
Yes,
gonna
I
say,
will.
real quick, you could also have people sign up for the Phobos Gala too. We could talk native plants all night that way.
I'm gonna bring over Ann Sachs.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. This has been really interesting. I just have a quick question. How do you feel about bringing in bird seed into your garden, or should you just rely on your native garden to feed the birds? Is there a sort of a strategy, or are you against it, or what do you think?
I actually, where I live, it's actually bear country, so I do not put out bird feeders. And they seem, there's plenty of bird traffic without them. I never really thought about, is there any negative implication of bird feeders? I don't really know. Obviously, it does work, it attracts them. But I don't have a lot of experience using them personally.
I think it's a great way to bring these birds to your yard, especially maybe if you're in a smaller space or you have a smaller yard where you wouldn't, like Mike's in bear country. I'm not necessarily in bear country, so the risk is lower for me. I think it's a great way to support them, especially now during their big migrations, they get so hungry. So between that and having a shallow water source, I think it's a positive. Samantha?
Yeah, I actually do both. I would say I put out feeders, and I also have the plants, but I would say, not all birds eat seeds. So you will not be getting, as many things like warblers, or you wouldn't get an eastern kingbird, for example. But what you could do in lieu of birdseed, if you want to try something else, is install a nest box on a post. And that would definitely attract your cavity nesting birds. So that would be things like your eastern bluebird, your chickadees, birds that build, some birds build a nest like in a tree, and they're called a cup nest, whereas other birds like to go in a cavity of either an old fence post or a cavity of an old dead or decaying tree. But with how many trees are being taken down, it's harder and harder for those birds to find those cavities. So if we could put little nest boxes up for them, start as early as March, and research the size of the hole depending on what bird you want to attract. Maybe have more than one if you have space. And you will definitely attract birds with a nest box just as much as conventional birdseed. So, but yeah, I'm okay with birdseed. I think it's great.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
just not all birds. Yep.
And you could, there's definitely, different birds that use, so there's hummingbird types of plants, right? There's, this time of year, I'm getting tons of goldfinch activity on my cup plants, for the seeds and pasture thistle. So yeah, there's things you could supplement, and obviously fruit birds, shrubs, especially with fruit on them, they're going to attract, another suite of species that eat a lot of fruit. So yeah, you could plant for a variety of things.
Yeah, I was just curious about like whether it was like giving them junk food when they really should be going to your plants and feeding off of your native garden. But I guess bird seed is just seed, so it's not like junk food.
Robin, and anyone else?
Yes, I'm going to bring over Richard Reeves. Okay, Richard, you're on. Okay, he seems to be unmuted. I'm not sure what the issue is. Richard, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Yeah, it says he's unmuted.
Yeah.
Oh,
If you would like, I can move on. I have a Robert or Janet as well. And Richard,
Yeah.
if you wouldn't mind raising your hands if you have the audio figured out. Okay, so I'm going to bring over Robert or Janet.
This is Janet. Am I unmuted?
yeah,
Oh,
we can
good.
hear you.
Terrific. I have two questions. One is, Mike touched on ground cover shortly, and I have some dead Pachysandra, and I'd like to replace it with something else. So if you could just chat a little bit more about that, so I can know what direction to go. And my other question is driveway. In Europe, the grass grows through something or other. And wonder if you recommend anything like that for Hopewell Valley. So Mike, do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I mean, the non-native Pachysandra, that's very common. It's not invasive, but if you're trying to replace it or have to replace it with something, it's very hard to find a native equivalent that does that. That spreads really aggressively, really densely, keeps other stuff from growing through it. You know, there is a native Pachysandra. It's not quite as hardy. You know, you could sort of make it, spice it up quite a bit. I had mentioned a shade meadow, you know, so you could plant a variety of lower growing things, have them all mixed together and have a really interesting ground cover. And there's some certain things that, you know, they don't fit the mold of like a Pachysandra, but something like a zigzag goldenrod. Now it's not evergreen, but what that does is form a nice mat. And then it sends up, you know, stalks that are 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall, you know, with goldenrod type flowers. So there's kind of like, if you kind of raise your ground cover level to 1 foot or 2, you can get, there's a lot of different native species you could use in combination to make, give you that effect of all the ground being completely covered.
Sounds like I should invite you over and you can
Sure.
give me some
Sure.
specific things to go after. Great.
Yeah. I mean, there's on our plant cell website, I believe one of the filters is ground cover. So that's something you can kind of peruse too. I mean, I'll come over too, but that is something that you could take a look at, and you know, some of the native options for low growing things.
Sounds good. So driveway suggestions?
Are they like semi-permeable paver kind of things? Like they have holes in them, basically? Is that, I've seen them too. And there's different versions of them that Mercer County Parks uses. I don't know much about them. I know they're more expensive than probably just putting pavement down. And I feel like David Hughes would know the answer to this question. I'm not exactly sure what it would be though. I feel like there's options. I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
agree. I feel like that's something that we've talked about even for us too, and it's like something that we would really love to be able to do, but right now it's not top of mind. I just, a quick question about your Pachysandra right now. Is it underneath a tree or is it just out in the open? Like, is it shaded or not shaded?
Shaded.
Okay, so one thing you can look up if you want for some perspective and some different ideas to Google, look up something called soft landings. What that is what Doug Tallamy has kind of coined that term, where underneath a tree, whatever species tree it is, there'll be insects and obviously other creatures that are using that tree to live on. And so when they fall to the ground, they would be otherwise mowed and, you know, not live their life cycle. But if you have something called a soft landing, in this case right now it's Pachysandra, but if it was something like foam flower or some type of fern or anything like that, or Appalachian sedge is one of my absolute favorites. I love that. It's almost like a looks like something you'd see on a Scottish lynx course. It's very dense and it's very green, but you don't have to mow it. So just Google soft landings for some ideas about what to plant native under the canopy of a tree.
I just looked that up and I bought some hellebore. Someone suggested that for a soft landing. You're not smiling. Is this not native or?
I just not familiar with it, so it doesn't mean it's not good. I just don't know that word yet. Just haven't learned it in my
I
lingo.
believe it's not native. There is a native called hellebore, but it grows along streams and it actually dies back sometime in late June. So probably it's not that. It's, there are non-natives that are not invasive that are called hellebores. I just have a question for Samantha, actually. How tall does that Appalachian sedge get? I'm curious.
Mine is probably, right now it's like the golden fleece goldenrod is neck and neck with it. So I would say it's at least 8 or 9 inches tall. It's pretty thick.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I will look it up.
Okay, Robin, we've got 2 minutes left. Is there any last question? Anyone have anything we can give a quick answer to?
I do not see any other hands raised, and I do not see Richard Reeves' hands raised, so I don't believe his audio has been fixed, so.
Okay, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so let's wrap this up. I really want to thank Mike and Samantha for sharing both your expertise, your energy, your passion around this. It's infectious. It makes me want to go and do a bunch of things in the garden. So thank you so much for sharing this, and we hope this will be the beginning of more discussions that we may have in the future with the community around this. So thank you so much. I also just want to thank the people behind today's event. I mean, it doesn't happen by magic, and I really want to thank a few people: Jim Fuga, Nell Horton, Nancy Fishman, Emily Brogue, who are EC members, for helping, and of course, Robin from our borough administration for all that behind the scenes work. So thank you so much. And I hope people feel inspired to take the next step in greenscaping from tonight. And please share the word with others. We will post some of this content on the website, but please do spread the word with your neighbors and friends in the community, and join our Facebook page as well. Thanks, everybody. Wish everyone a good night.